Do you have do you have questions, or what are we? What
I have questions. I'm going to ask you like.
Well, fuck, man.
With Geek Nation Tours and Tales from the Outer Rim. We're here at the Las Vegas Open, put on by Frontline Gaming, and I was invited by Mike Bird, a really good friend of mine, and of course he's the executive producer to this show, and his son Mike Jr. to come out and play the LVO narrative. I'm really excited. I've never been to this convention before, and we're going to do some cool stuff in Vegas also. We're going to go eat some really good food, visit, because these are really good friends of ours, and of course can't wait to roll some dice and get my 40K on.
Who wants to just like fight? Kill dudes!
So we're here at the LVO and it's Thursday night. Pre-registration is happening right behind us. They're still setting up. Tomorrow's a big day for the narrative that we're going to be playing with our good friends Mike and his son. I get to play my NIDS. Mike's playing Space Wolves and Junior's playing Nurgle. I'm really excited about the narrative. It has some cool rules that I wanted to talk about. So each mission have a whole bunch of objectives that you have to go and grab or do. But what's really great about it, they have this mechanic that as you get more and more objectives, your whole faction, that's how they judge whether you win or not. And it's not really about winning the game so much as getting those objectives.
So these are the objectives, are murdering other units.
Oh. Also, I'll be playing with 2 to 3 people per mission. And so each game you'll see up to 6 people playing one game, which I find also really exciting. It's interesting how they do the points, because we get to talk about it prior, and I could be playing 500 points, and my teammate, if there's only 2 of us, could be playing 1,500 points. And we just alter our lists to see what we can do with the mission. Narrative-wise, of course, this is an extension of what happened last year, so the story continues. We're on an agri world of Vanner 5, and so there's this huge convalescence of factions trying to battle for this planet, and I'm excited to be part of the story. So we have the some planet that I don't remember the name of right now. Okay. And of course we're scouting it, seeing if we can build a tour here at the LVO. And what we're looking for is how pre-registration works, how it flows into the next few days, and how their community knits together. And that's a big one for Geek Nation Tours, is how the community comes together. Lots of cheerful people, a lot of people are coming back, so it's clearly popular. I'm glad to see that. That's a big aspect of what we want. And already people have smiling faces, ready to roll some dice, and pre-registration looks like it's going well, and we'll see how the next couple of days go. So we're here at the LVO, and we so happen to have Mike Bird and Mike Jr. Mr. Mike Bird is our executive producer for the show, and he invited us to come and play, well, invited me to come and play the narrative. Really exciting, that's coming tomorrow. Oh my god, it's already, I know. At like 9 a.m. we start?
Something like that, 9 or 10.
And then it's like all day though, right?
Oh yeah, till 8.
And that's 2 days in a row that it's 8 o'clock. And then Monday I think stops at 4-ish.
4.
But I'm excited about tomorrow.
Yeah, it's our first narrative. We've never done a narrative before.
Yeah. Oh really? So first narrative ever?
Ever.
Really?
Yeah.
So what kind of gamer are you?
You know, just kind of a pickup gamer. I mean, we love to invent stories and love to do, you know, storylines and have a really cool objective or something. So we usually make a story.
So you're playing a narrative there?
Yeah, but it's usually just one game or an apocalypse game. Like we've played several days in a row, but like one giant apocalypse game. We've never played a series of linked games. Never a narrative at an event like this where everything affected the next game, and it just looks so cool. So.
Yeah. Do you make up the story? Do you make up the story when you're gaming against each other? Or do you just go and let's go play some?
Yeah.
And does it change your gameplay when you're playing?
I don't know. Maybe.
I say so. I mean, it's a lot less competitive. I mean, you kind of do play it to
It's all about fun.
shed some blood, have some fun.
You were recently told if you know the rules, you're cheating.
Yes.
That's kind of our philosophy.
John Stollard said that to me. That's just a perfect quote. I'm going to use that shit all.
I just did.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. Damn you, you can't. That was my next thing I was going to say. And he also said his favorite part of the game is setup. So he puts all his miniatures down, and he kind of said, after we put all our miniatures down, I look out and I see everybody with the flags and everything like that, and everybody's ready to go. I don't even have to play the rest of the game. So he's done it. That's his favorite. Did you have a favorite time in a game that
I would say that would be my favorite time too. And then the parting shot, what the field looks like at the very end when there's smoke billowing off the table, there's dead bodies everywhere, burning tanks, and then the two warlords and one guy's dead or something. I mean, that tells a story,
Right.
So beginning and end, I think.
And you have the two guys matched off. I think that's your favorite, right?
It is my favorite. I think I told you that before.
Yeah, you said that before.
There's always some culmination that we want to get to.
That's right.
Da-da, whether it's the two dreadnoughts or the two big monsters or the two warlords or whatever.
Yeah, I mean and for me that would be a narrative direction to your games anyway.
Yeah.
Like that you'd love to have that, like you would read in a novel.
Of course.
Like, two Primarchs fighting, or
Always
two,
at the end there's a big battle.
Yeah, I mean, every story needs its climax. So I mean, always the meeting of the warlords in the middle.
Yeah.
It's kind of go back to what I said, like not being as competitive, but going for that big moment and setting up that moment.
Right.
The whole game's about.
We were talking about this earlier, that we get to have this hobby that allows us to be whatever gamer we want to be.
Yeah.
And that you can be super competitive, you can be a story driven, you can be all about the modeling. How do you see yourself as a gamer?
For me, playing with miniatures on a tabletop is an escape.
Right.
It's a time when I can kind of be somebody else, and I think that's all gamers are like. That's why we game.
Right.
We don't want to be ourselves. Ourselves are boring.
That's right.
Stress and kids. No. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do actually.
But it's a time for us to be who we've always imagined or aspired to be, or something like that.
Right.
We can be our wolf lord, or we can be our war boss, or we can be the guy, and we talk like him and we say things, and of course as a wolf player I like to drink a beer.
Of course.
We can be somebody else for a while,
right,
and get into that moment and really experience it. So
you're like a role player almost.
Very much so, yeah.
That's how I see myself. It took me a long time to figure that out. Honestly, it did.
That's what's intrigued me so much about you talking about Frostgrave. That really combines the role playing
Sure does.
and minis and the terrain and everything. I can't wait to play some games with you.
It has this sense of nostalgia also that I really like, because that's how I kind of started.
Yep.
I used to board game when I was a kid. My parents were always super enthusiastic about board games. I actually come from a really strong sports family.
Right.
You wouldn't think, they would buy us board games all the time. But the first game that I actually bought for myself was Dungeons and Dragons. For me, I've came full circle that I think that I'm now an RPGer in a lot of ways, and that's why Frostgrave really intrigues me. And yourself?
I think for me, it's maybe a little bit more competitive, but it still goes back to that role-playing aspect. From such a young age, getting into we got into third edition for Warhammer, but at the same time, like I got introduced in playing Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, but that kind of really brings on the aspect of creating your own world. I think over the last couple of years, I definitely. A couple of years ago, I played in the 40K Championships at Adepticon, super competitive. I really enjoy that role-playing aspect and creating the story, but every once in a while I do enjoy playing.
You want to get in there.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about how you got him into gaming?
Like you said, there's several different things that we used to play. When we first saw the game of fantasy and 40K, it kind of rang a bell, because I used to build 1/35th scale military miniatures. Okay. We would build our forces, and we would play with them out in the yard. So when I saw tanks and minis and then there was a rule book and stuff, I was like, hey man, this is cool.
And how old is he at this point?
Shoot, I don't know, 8 or 10 or something, or 8.
So you weren't gaming regularly prior to him coming into the hobby, basically?
Not so much. Life had taken us in different directions with business and such like that. When we saw the game being played, it was like, wow, we got to get into this. So it's just like anybody else. When you first see it, it's like, oh wow, what is this?
I think the experience you guys had is interesting though, because a lot of my friends, and including myself, of course, I've been a miniature wargamer for a long time.
Yes.
I played Rope Trader.
Right.
So, but you guys got in it to get together.
Yeah,
that's what
pretty
you're
much.
saying. So tell me about your memories of that.
I remember going to tournaments at like 10 years old.
GTs.
Yeah.
And wiping the floor with guys too, and they were pissed. They did not appreciate a little kid taking it to the table.
They used to get very, very angry at me.
Really?
Like actually, yeah, full on tantrums. It was really funny. I remember one time, I don't remember who I was ever playing, but I beat somebody and he got mad to the point because I kept rolling really well. That he actually cursing and stuff. And his girlfriend's like, you gotta calm down. The kid's like, it's like a 10-year-old kid that you're cursing. And it's almost, I mean, it's fun. It's one of the funny things about like the wargaming community is it brings like everyone together,
right?
And almost to the point where I mean, you don't see, I guess, the other person as any other individual than like what they are. Like you don't see, like you might be playing a 10-year-old kid, but you don't see them as that.
That's right. Well, because you're seeing the dice,
yeah,
and you're seeing the monsters or whatever are coming across from you. That's who you're really
What
playing.
army were you playing in them? Do you remember?
I think it's back when I played Tau. Before they got all their super big suits.
All the big
and
stuff.
everything.
Can you tell me? Do you remember your first miniature you bought it as a kid? And then, can you tell me? Do you remember what you bought together?
Before I even bought miniatures was, of course, first edition D&D. I was in 7, but that was perfect. So when soon as D&D came out, the little blue book with the dragon.
Oh yeah, right.
I grabbed that up and we started playing that. So that was my first big step into the other side. As was I think everybody else's in the 70s when
it blew us
when they were
away,
kids. It totally blew us away. It's like, what is this is the magic stuff, man.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there
magical.
in the couple of years after we got into it, writing my own modules, listening to Rush, because Rush put the images in your mind, and then the same guys that I played D&D with ended up being the same guys that I collected minis with.
Right.
And my first miniature I ever collected, I think, was an M8 Greyhound. I think it was a six-wheeled armored car.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was a Monogram or a Revell model.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty simple.
Cool.
Had a couple of dudes with it. And around about that same time, we loved to watch some of the cool TV shows.
Right.
Baba Black Sheep, Boynton, and the
Right.
Corsair Squadron out on the Bella La Cava in the island. That was a fucking rad show.
Right.
And then Rat Patrol, the guys in the desert with the Jeeps, the long range desert group, those guys fighting Rommel in the desert. That was awesome. So that pushed us into building more minis and kind of reliving some of those little battles. When we were like, 8 and 10, it was kind of like I brought this big moving box with all my models in it. I had a clipboard where I had all my units organized, and we would put them out, and we didn't have any dice or anything. We just played, played, and we played all day.
Right.
When another year or two went by, then it was like, okay, it wasn't too cool to say, okay, boom, I blew up your tank.
Right.
Now we need some sort of structure, so we started throwing dice and using a measuring tape.
Oh, okay, cool.
We just kind of figured that out. It was dice and a tape measure. I mean, there's no way to do
everyone's
it.
got-
I guess you use a broom handle or something like that. I guess, but
And what miniatures do you think that you got together?
I know the first thing when we actually started wargaming was the 3rd edition starter box, right?
Dark Eldar
And Ultramarines.
and Ultramarines. Yes. Yeah.
Ultras.
They were awesome.
So we talked about Frostgrave and 40K. What else are you into?
Bolt action?
Bolt action.
Full action.
Bolt action. And bolt action we started getting into because it was not only were we kind of moving away from 40K because of 7th edition, but it also, we played some demo games with those guys. And the demo games were awesome. Like usually a demo game was like was like a 5-minute or 10-minute demo game.
Right.
We played a demo game at the Adepticon with Price.
Oh, yeah.
Once, and it was like an hour and a half, and it got all
really?
serious and like, oh, let's say, and the guy's like, wow, what's going on? We're like, oh, wait. So we like took over his sample table, like we're shooing other people away, and yeah, it was awesome. So we're like, oh, we got to get into this.
That's good press for him, though, because people are coming and seeing how enthusiastic you are.
I think so. I think so.
Right. Is there any historical period that you wouldn't play? Anything he's not playing?
Yeah, we try to eliminate any political overtones from gaming. I mean, my goodness, you know.
I think with historical games too, it kind of, even with the bad nature, but maybe behind some of the units, you still gotta respect history, I guess.
Since we're talking about history, who would you want to meet if you could meet anyone? Fictional, historical, whatever. Is there a person that you want to meet?
I've actually been asked this question a couple times in English classes, and every time Winston Churchill. I think my interest originally was piqued. I think I looked him up originally after actually going to Iron Maiden concerts. And,
Oh yeah.
The Churchill intro speech.
yeah.
Perfect.
And kind of look from there, looking into him, and kind of looking into everything he did on the political side, and kind of spearheading and saving England, kind of.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. And yourself?
That's a tough act to follow. Winston Churchill. I would say, I mean, if we're going to stay in the same period, I'd say maybe like Patton.
Patton, oh yeah. Okay.
Patton, good old Jumpin' George. I mean, he was rootin' tootin', and he spoke his mind.
Right.
He did not cover anything up, and he was the anti-politician. He was a warrior, consummate warrior, so that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Very big on history and everything
Right.
too. He would sit and talk to so he would go out and much like one of his counterparts, Rommel,
Right.
he would just go out to the front lines and sit and talk with his troops, and everybody would just come around and listen to him. It was like Grandfather George, you know, and he would just talk to them about history and about how to be a warrior and what it means to be a warrior, and his guys were just like mesmerized, and that's why he kicked so much ass. I mean, because he just inspired so much with his troops, you know. So that would be neat to meet those guys, I think.
Before I ask you about the golden age of wargaming, is there anybody that you'd like to thank?
Yeah, my grandfather. My grandfather. He was kind of like my hero, I guess you could call. He was a young man that grew up in Wabasso, Florida, when there was, I think, 1,000 people living in Wabasso in the early 1900s. And his family grew citrus and started the Indian River Fruit Company in Florida. And as a kid, he was a world-class sailor, and he sailed Moth-class sailboats, which are 10 foot long. And he sailed from Key West to New York. Wow! As a kid in a 10-foot sailboat.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and in my storage unit, you got to see these. You may have seen them, but you don't know what they are. But I have boxes and boxes of amazing trophies that he won as a kid sailing. And naturally, he ended up going to University of Florida, and he and his 2 fraternity brothers married 3 sorority sisters from the University of Florida. And of course, one of them was my grandmother. World War II breaks out, and he joins the Navy, of course, but as a pilot. So he was a fighter pilot in World War II, and his brother Joe was a B-17 pilot in Europe. So they were both pilots in World War II, and the stories those guys would just put out it was incredible. Yeah. So after a couple of tours of combat duty, they gave him a choice of whatever he wanted to do, and so he taught flying for a while. He was an instructor. Then that was kind of boring, so he wanted to still contribute more to the war effort. So a place opened up in Newfoundland at a secret air base up there, and he was a test pilot, which was the most dangerous flying job you could possibly get, which my grandmother had strictly forbidden him to do anymore, but she didn't know where he was because it was top secret.
Right.
So he did that for a while, and then he started ferrying planes just for fun. He would fly planes from the factories in the Northeast and New Jersey areas, and so they had to ship them to the Pacific. Oh, yeah. They had to get them there somehow. Well, they fly them, you know.
Oh, so, really? Wow.
And the rules on ferrying planes were, as long as you got the plane from point A to point B in a basically straight line, you can go wherever you want. Oh, wow. And he ended up landing in Jackson, Wyoming, in the little airstrip there. Right. in the early 1940s, and he loved it so much that he ended up moving there.
Wow.
After the war. So yeah, a lot of cool stories and stuff there. A lot of cool pictures and all that kind of stuff. And then he only had one child, my mother, so he didn't have a son. So I was kind of like his son. So he shared everything with me. But I kicked myself in the butt because I wish if I could go back, I would talk to him a lot more about the greatest generation type of thing, because he epitomized that. You know, it's so true. And, you know, a lot of folks today don't have a clue what that means. You know, save the world type of thing.
Yeah, well,
it's like, wow,
it's true. Wow.
So I gotta say, I mean, I just thank him for you know, everything that he gave to me and he shared with me, because he really instilled himself in me, and I like to think that he lives on in us.
Right.
I guess along those lines, I mean, I never actually had the chance to meet him, so I mean, I would have loved to meet him.
He would have loved you.
I hear a lot. That's for sure. You always hear a lot of stories. You always hear a lot of stories about your ancestors and stuff. So I mean, I think being able to go back and meet all these people you hear about, I think that would be something. I mean, that'd be priceless.
Right.
You know, he was a man's man, you know, and he was definitely an alpha male kind of guy, you know, from everything he experienced and all the near-death stuff and all that. He didn't take no crap from anybody, you know, but he was very generous and loving man, but absolute right from wrong, you know, a narrow line there, you know. So all his values and ethics he kind of instilled into me. And it took me a long time to bring those to fruition. When you're young, you just hear, you know, damn the torpedoes and whatever, but it's there. You just have to kind of bring it out in yourself and nurture it, you know. So, but yeah, thanks to Granddad, A.B. Michael, my grandpa. So
very cool. Okay, let's bring it back to wargaming.
Oh yeah.
So, last question. So, do you think it's the golden age of wargaming?
I think it pretty much would be. If it's not, it's pretty close to it. I don't know that there was a time that wasn't a golden age of wargaming, other than, you know, some of the later editions of certain games that just got too convoluted. But wargaming is all about fun. It's all about you're pushing minis around on the table and rolling dice and having beer, and you're supposed to be having fun. So that's what it's all about. So as long as games kind of keep that in mind, I think it's the golden age of wargaming. So.
I mean, I think I kind of agree. I think over time, I mean, I think it's been continuing to be the golden age of wargaming. You know, years and years ago, there wasn't nearly as much as there is now.
How awesome can it get?
Yeah. Be creative.
You know, like this show, the origin of this particular show,
right.
Tales from the Outer Rim, is the idea of exploring the deeper side of gaming. And gaming and geeks and what makes us play games and things like that. That's kind of what this show is about. And of course, I want to do some traveling to remote places and things like that, which is also, you know, and find little pockets of people here and there, little bitty communities and remote places to play and see what makes them tick. Why are you playing this here?
Bali and see what they're.
Yes. Yeah, there's a Warhammer table set up on the beach, you know, or something. Or
yeah, we'll do it. We're gonna do it.
I mean, I think that the wargaming, and like Mike was saying, it reaches so many people now.
Right.
That I guarantee you, like at, you know, the Antarctic weather station, there's probably some minis there that they play with. There may be some minis on the space station.
That's right.
There may be minis, you know, at the Kremlin.
That's
there
right.
may be minis anywhere. You never know.
That's
and
right.
I want to see what those are, you know, and hear their story about how they started playing. I want to see about that.
Dig a little bit and see how far we've come and where our past has brought us. Mm-hmm. Have adventures.
Have adventures. Right. It's all about good Bilbo adventures.
So we wanted to do a few of the kind of cool stuff that you can do here that is off the beaten track. We're going to go dune buggeting in the desert. So we're going to take a bus out into the desert with a company called Sun Buggy Fun Rentals. We're going to hop on a dune buggy and go and do their Baja. I'm a little bit nervous about that because it's kind of out of my comfort zone.
Explain it to me one more time.
But I figure just live. Fill up your life and have as many experiences as possible.
I'm all strapped in.
And sometimes I do that. As a matter of fact, if I'm scared, I try to push myself through it and have the experience anyway. should be a lot of fun.
So fast, nerd.
everybody else too. So that's not a good thing.
It really was an amazingly fun adventure. Racing around the dunes, I couldn't help but think of Mad Max. It really had the feeling of a nice afternoon in the apocalypse. The fighter jets from the nearby Air Force Base flying overhead really added to the vibe. It was like they were on attack runs over and over and over again. It was a blast.
Hope you didn't do that walking against the wind shit. So it's Sunday, last day of the LVO, and it's all wrapped up. Had a great time with Mike. Any boogers? Rolled some dice, went to some really great restaurants, did some dune buggying, and just enjoyed each other's company.
Finnegan, stabbing and everything.
There's also community things to do at the LVO, by the way. The pub crawl and the other stuff, they do try to get everybody together. Also, there's lots of seminars, there's lots of painting contests.
Labeled as best hobbyist, which is actually best paint job.
Mike Bird's for his Space Wolf Land Raider.
Okay, next up.
There's, of course, the huge 40K championship for the ITC, and there's lots to do. But I think that if we were to come back here as a tour group, I would really be worried. I'm still a little bit worried about the whole creating that community thing, because there's so much to do out there. So good times, and hopefully we can bring it together and create something awesome. So whatever way you can, experience the world as best you can. Get out there and see the world and fill up your life.
Get it all out.